step of sharing all of this money that he's conquered from the Amalekites with his friends up in Judah. Well, we come to chapter 31. Many books of the Bible end with the death of a major character. Genesis ended with the death of Jacob and Joseph. Deuteronomy ends with the death of Moses. Joshua ends with the death of Joshua. The Gospels end with the death of Jesus. This book ends with the death of Saul, with judgment on Saul. And we come to this horrible conclusion here on Mount Gilboa. Now, Mount Gilboa is down there at the south. This is actually I'm sure lots of you noticed this, but these are all Greek names, and that's not right. This is way too new a map. You all saw that, didn't you? Yeah. I was looking at this morning going, wait a minute. No, that's not right. Anyway, but Mount Gilboa is still where it's supposed to be. Now, this is a painting of the death of Saul by a guy named Bruegel. And it's a horrible, I couldn't find a great copy, but I like Bruegel, so I put it up there. Bruegel does all these little details. You can see Saul and his armor bearer right there dying, but there's a huge number of people in the background. And I like Bruegel because he puts in all those details. He says everybody's important. It's not just Saul and his armor bearer who are dying. There are tons of people down there dying. You know, and Bruegel puts in all this kind of detail. Here's another one. I can't see this one very well either. This one I like even better than Bruegel's because it's got that blood red sky. And it's got rocks. And these people have died. And Saul is in the middle there with a sword in his chest. You can't hardly see him. But it's just a horrible situation. People have painted this over the years to show the despair that can come into the world. David, we just saw, is a success at everything he's done. And Saul, on the other hand, is dead. David has rescued his family, his possessions. He has been able to bless his men. He's been able to bless the cities of Judah. And Saul dies, killing everyone around him. Everyone is dead. Saul thought it would be better to kill himself than to let him to fall into the hands of the Philistines because he knew what the Philistines would do. They would play with him before they killed him. You know, they would do horrible things to him. They did horrible things to him after he died. They took his body and decapitated it and then tacked it to the wall at Bethshan. Bethshan was a place down there. Mount Gilboa is there to the left. Somehow or this map got fuzzed. But Bethshan is in a high place so that everybody could see this. So that everybody would know that we've beat the Israelites. So that the whole world would know that the God of the Israelites was a junky God to believe in, and why should you do it? And that's why they took his armor and put it in the temple of the Ashtoreths. Because they knew that our God beat their God. Israel was in a horrible place. This is a temple at Bethshan. Saul is dead and laughed at. His body tacked to a wall. Israel was divided. The Philistines now controlled the Jezreel Valley. And the Israelites north of that and the Israelites south of that, and they were surrounded by the Philistines. And God was being laughed at as well because their God can't take care of them. Their great champion is dead. And why should we believe anything that happens to those folks? The book ends with this one loyal group of people, the people of Jabesh Gilead. If you remember from chapter 11, they owed Saul. Saul came to their rescue when they were about to be destroyed. And this was really Saul's one shining moment as a king, was rescuing the people of Jabesh Gilead. And they march all night. They were on the other side of the river there. They marched all night, took down Saul's body and his sons. They were decayed by that time, and Israelites don't normally burn bodies, but they decided that since there was so much decay there, that they would burn them, and then they buried the bones, and then they mourned, as they should have for God's anointed. They weren't saying that God shouldn't have killed Saul. Saul deserved his judgment. But they were saying God is a righteous God. He had anointed Saul king. We should have some respect for that decision, even though Saul didn't have any respect for that decision. And they mourned for what Saul did. These chapters, again, tell us a lot about David's inner life, about who David was and what he believed, and how we can get through horrible situations or even mildly difficult situations in our life. We need to have the same kind of response that David did. David found strength in the Lord, his God. It had David's part. He had to act on his faith. He had to act on God being a glorious God. He had to act on God's faithfulness. He had to choose to follow God. God did his part. I mean, this is a whole section of rescue by God. Here David is caught between Achish and Saul. God just moves him right out of the way. No problem at all. David goes down to Ziklag. His men are going to kill him. God moves it, and everything is great. After the fact. At the time, David had to trust like we have to trust. When we have horrible situations, we have to trust in the Lord, even though we cannot see how God is moving. But we know that God is good, and He's going to do something good for us. David does not have a passive faith. This is the same thing that James talks about. He says faith without works is dead. Faith without some activity, acting on that, on God's faithfulness, is not faith at all. We have to follow after God. We have to choose to have faith, and it has to produce something. Philippians chapter 2 says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act according to His good purpose. These chapters about David's life, I think, are a great illustration of these verses. First off, we have to continue to work out our salvation. Salvation just isn't a one-time deal. It is a one-time deal that has current results that will go throughout our life. And we have to continue to work out that salvation in our lives. And we have to do it. We have to do those things that will strengthen that life. Read the Bible, pray, come to church. We have to do those things that act out that life. Do good works. Help the poor. Take care of the needy. Visit the prisoner. Take care of the sick. We have to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. Because there are times when God is going to put us into situations where there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of trembling. You know, how do we know how this is going to end up? How do we know what God is going to do? You know, all we can see is Achish on one side and Saul on the other, and they're both trying to kill us. But God can work it out. Now, I don't know if God is